From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up today on AgDay, growth without irrigation.
So we'd never feed our plants. Once they're in the ground, that's it.
We take you to a garden that lets nature find a way.
Have you ever wanted to come up and just touch corn and soybeans, even if you haven't seen them before? Well, now you'll have the opportunity on the National Mall. We'll have that story coming up on AgDay.
Plus, U.S. leaders head back to the bargaining table with China.
So we have a long list of issues.
As we continue to dive into the numbers when it comes to the second round of tariff aid.
This is a major cash flow infusion that's needed, really, desperately in farm country.
AgDay, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever.
Good morning, I'm Tyne Morgan, reporting from our Kansas City offices. Clinton has the day off. Well, sign-ups for the next round of market facilitation program payments start today. As we told you Friday, the payments range from $15 to $150 per acre for non-specialty crops. Dairy producers will receive a 20-cent per hundredweight payment, hog producers an $11 per head payment, and the payments will be made in 3 waves. Farm Journal Washington correspondent Jim Wiesmeyer says the one key change is with the payment cap for producers.
I think the sleeper, if you will, is the doubling of the payment cap in this program, and separate payment caps for row crops, specialty crops, and combined hog and dairy operations. But in no instances can an individual have more than 500,000 payments, double it for the spouse. That is a significant increase in the payment cap for this program. And but it will mean the larger producers will leave less money on the table in the case that they did in the first installment of the MFP.
Wiesmeyer says in his opinion, this is a better overall program than last year, as there's not as large of differences between counties and regions. Well, the payments vary by county, with the highest payment rates hitting the South. So how were those payment rates calculated? Well, that's the biggest unknown after the rollout. Look at this map from Agricultural Economic Insights. It shows the bulk of the payments going to the southern tier of states, as well as the core of the Corn Belt. Economist David Widmeyer says even though the payment calculation was not released, he thinks similar guiding principles USDA used in 2018 were incorporated into this year's payment structure as well.
They did not release the exact metrics or the exact formula behind that, but if we think about that farm level formula we had last year, so it was production times a payment rate. Something similar happened at the county level. So they went back like they did in 2018 and said how much were soybeans impacted on a per bushel basis, or corn impacted on a per bushel basis, or cotton on a per pound of cotton raised basis. They looked at yields in that county, looked at historic production, and they kind of threw it all together and created a weighted average payment rate for each county.
Widmeyer points out the bulk of the acres are in the Delta region and Corn Belt. So even though payment rates are higher in the South, he thinks the Corn Belt and Delta will see the bulk of the money as well. Well, USDA also accounting for prevent plant acres in the second round of trade aid, pegging that at $15 per acre. But just how many prevent plant acres are there right now? USDA's risk management agency pegging prevent plant acres for corn right now between 7 million and 8 million acres, soybeans at 2 to 3 million. It puts the tally for all crops at 12.5 million acres, and final amounts are expected to go higher. AgDay's Betsy Gibbon in Washington right now talking to USDA and congressional leaders. She asked a USDA official about the dollar amount so far when it comes to prevent plant acres.
We're up to right at $458 million in prevent plant claims paid. That's up from about $300 million a week ago. So as you can see, claims are beginning to get processed pretty fast. We're really just into the processing part of the season for prevent plant. So it'll take a little bit for us to come up with actual total numbers of acres and policies.
Barbre says USDA is looking at this year being one of their bigger years when it comes to prevent plant claims. While in Washington, Betsy also learned from USDA officials resurveying for the August crop report is now complete. Officials also telling AgDay that data was collected over 3 weeks, calling it a big effort.
You know, if you look back, we had 16.7% of those corn acres were still left to be planted when we did our interviewing back in June. More than 40% of the soybeans, so that translates to a lot of acres that we need to go back and visit.
Honig said they have to wait a little bit longer to do that resurvey because things were still getting planted. The report comes out Monday, August 12th. Well, the trade war turning into trade talks. The Chinese government has approved several of its companies to buy U.S. corn, cotton, sorghum, and pork without having to face those big tariffs with the U.S. That report from Bloomberg. It says the move follows the approval of 3 million tons of U.S. soybeans for purchase with tariff waivers. This comes as U.S. officials are traveling to China this week to take part in the first face-to-face trade talks since President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping agreed to a trade war truce. Once again, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer will be taking the lead in the talks for the U.S. But this time, the group will meet tomorrow and Wednesday in Shanghai.
Well, it's good we're going back there. I think, as you know, we're going to Shanghai at their request. There's some symbolic importance to them of the Shanghai communique with Kissinger. So I take that as an important step that they really are sincere in wanting to move forward. It's very important to us. They're back in the markets buying agriculture. They've made those commitments to us. We want to see those commitments fulfilled. My expectation is there'll be a few more meetings before we get a deal done. So I wouldn't expect we'll resolve all the issues, but the fact that we're back at the table at the direction of the two presidents is important. So
Mnuchin warned there are still a lot of issues to be worked out between the two countries. Well, a California judge has cut a $2 billion verdict in a Roundup case against Bayer to $86 million. The judge slashing the award for a couple who blamed Bayer Ag's glyphosate-based weed killer Roundup for their cancer. The judge said the jury's billion-dollar punitive damages awards were excessive and unconstitutional, but he rejected Bayer's request to strike the punitive award outright. Well, it's the time of year for county fairs and tractor shows. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman has a look at a special moment from farm country in today's Crop Comments. Mike?
Thanks, Tyne. Well, lots of people remember their first experiences with a tractor. Check this one out. Matt Lane of Potomac, Illinois on Twitter sharing this video with us. Matt says this is his 14-year-old son, Christopher, taking his 1957 720 John Deere to his first tractor show. Matt says the tractor used to belong to an old family friend who restored it. His family now owns it, and they're riding it in honor of that close friend. Looks like that machine is in great condition. Look at it go there. And I'll have more coming up with your forecast, but first, here are some hometown temps.
Introducing Farm Journal TV, on demand 24/7. AgDay, Machinery Pete TV. U.S. Farm Report on your phone and tablet. Download the Farm Journal TV mobile app today.
Well, something new in Washington, D.C., a salute to American agriculture as the farm heads to the city. AgDay's Betsy Gibbon is there to show us an exhibit showing the voice of the farmer. Betsy?
Tyne, the Farm Journal Foundation and USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service are teaming up together to bring an exhibit here at the National Mall called The Voice of the Farmer. It's here to celebrate and educate about American agriculture. You can take a look and see this exhibit, which debuted on Friday. It's open to the public, but on Fridays, farm ambassadors will come in and educate about ag. There's video modules and even a walking tour. The National Corn Growers Association and Trust in Food are all part of this too. Tyne, this exhibit allows consumers to come up and actually touch corn and soybeans, especially if they've never seen them before or never been so close to some of the crops. So some pretty cool stuff here. Now reporting in Washington, D.C., I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Thanks, Betsy. Still ahead, the wheat tour wraps up. We have the update on the spring's crop. And later, putting the illuminate trust in Mother Nature to make things grow. How this garden is able to thrive in a heat wave in the country.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
Well, the annual wheat tour just wrapped up in the Northern Plains. The Wheat Quality Council tour reporting it expects an average spring wheat yield of 43.1 bushels per acre. But do analysts agree? Betsy Gibbon has more in this morning's analysis.
Here now at the agribusiness desk with Brian Basting of Advanced Trading. And Brian, let's talk about the wheat market a little bit, specifically with spring wheat. Now, I want to point out that we're doing this analysis on Tuesday because the wheat tour is going on in the northern plains, and it's not done until the end of the week here. But USDA on paper says that the wheat crop doesn't really look drastically behind, and it looks pretty good. What are you hearing?
That's a good summary, Betsy. The crop right now, we believe, has record yield potential. Now, it's not in the bin yet, we realize that, but the crop conditions have been good. We've seen some timely rain up in the areas there that need rain. It got a little bit dry in parts of North Dakota. Those areas have gotten some rain. Right now, we think we've got a really good spring wheat crop coming on up in the northern plains, and the market's reflecting that, pushing contract lows here in Minneapolis.
Usually there's a lot of wheat globally, but when you look at some of these reports saying that Australia and Russia may have a lower wheat crop than usual, do you think that will make a large dent with markets? Are you looking at that?
We are monitoring that very closely, Betsy. The areas we're watching right now in this order would be Australia. Key time period is August and September for Australia. They remain quite dry even after last year's drought. It feels like that the crop is getting smaller in Russia, and perhaps the crop is also getting smaller in parts of the European Union. Now, I don't want to give the impression to your viewers that these crops are a disaster in Russia or Europe. They're good crops, they're just not as big as what we thought earlier. Something
to look at, especially when you look at the other row crop conditions that we have here in the U.S., that this could potentially be something different. So.
Yeah, that would be a wild card. If, for example, Australia would have a severe drought again, that may open up some export opportunities for U.S. wheat later this fall.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Really appreciate the time. We'll be back with more Ag Day in just a moment.
To talk with Brian one-on-one, call Advanced Trading at 800-664-2314 or head online to advanced-trading.com. Join Andrew McRae for Farming the Countryside, a farmer-focused podcast that is all about production agriculture. Farming the Countryside is available wherever you listen to your favorite podcast and is brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, the world's largest provider of crop inputs and services.
Meteorologist Mike Hoffman joins us. Mike, we really enjoyed giving our air conditioners a break last week, but things are warming up again.
Yeah, and especially in the west. Some of that heat's going to try to come east, as I'm going to show you coming up here, but it's going to be kind of beaten back by a trough in the eastern parts of the country. So kind of depends on where you live. Root zone moisture has been changing pretty dramatically the last few weeks. We still have some pockets of blue here, which are the wet areas, as you can see, but there are some developing dry areas in the southeast, especially western half of Texas into western Kansas. And you can see some really dry conditions have developed in western Washington and Oregon and western Montana. So it kind of depends on where you live. Obviously, this time of the year, it depends on where the thunderstorms end up popping up and where they don't. And that makes a huge difference. Not much drought across the country. A few pockets in the southeast, South Texas, western Washington, western Oregon. And there's a few little areas of dryness starting to show up across the Corn Belt, but no real drought at this moment. Estimated rainfall for the past week. This takes us from a week ago Saturday through this past Friday. And you can see some of the heavier amounts have been in the east, obviously, but along the Gulf Coast in places, from Tampa all the way back toward New Orleans. And then we saw a couple of complexes of thunderstorms moving through the upper Midwest from Minnesota across Wisconsin into central portions of Michigan and also southeastern Nebraska into northern Missouri. Here's the way this week is shaping up. There's the ridge out west. It's going to hold. It's going to try to come east as well. Not through the middle of the week. That's still kind of on the cool side right through the Great Lakes. And then the heat tries to come east for 2 or 3 days as the trough gives way. That's Friday. And then heading through the weekend, looks like the trough digs back into the Great Lakes in the northeast, keeping things kind of cool in those areas. So I am going below normal for the northern portions of the Great Lakes this week into southern Canada. Most of the west and the southwest expected to be above normal. Below normal precipitation from Missouri down to the Rio Grande and out west. Above normal, then the only place I really have doing that is the far northeast. All right, 90-day outlook. August temperatures above normal east, south, and west. Below normal only in a small pocket there in the plains. I take that out as we head into September. Above normal for most of the lower 48 except the northern plains. And I shrink that normal area even more on October into the far northern plains. Precipitation next 90 days, I'm going above normal from the southeast into eastern New Mexico and below normal in the far northwestern portions of the country. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. We'll head to Eugene, Oregon. First of all, sunny and pleasantly warm, high of 86 degrees. Omaha, Nebraska, lots of sunshine, warm and less humid, high 85. And Charleston, South Carolina, mostly sunny, pleasantly warm, afternoon high 88.
Thanks, Mike. Well, an update to a story we brought you earlier this summer. U.S. House members from 3 Gulf Coast states are backing their governor's request for a fisheries disaster declaration. They say freshwater flooding into saltwater ecosystems is killing oysters and hurting the fishing industry. The governors of Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama all seeking aid. When we first reported on this in June, some areas were already seeing 100% oyster mortality. Well, coming up, a garden that doesn't just survive without irrigation, it thrives. Plus, Machinery Pete.
Hey, stay tuned, folks. Coming up, I'll give you the very latest from the front lines of the used farm equipment market.
The 2019 Pro Farmer Midwest Crop Tour is coming soon. Kicking off August 19th, watch for extensive coverage on air and online. The premier sponsor of Crop Tour is Pioneer, with support from IBM, RCIS, RAM, AeroVironment, Titan Tires, and Farm Credit Services of America.
Well, the numbers are out. Machinery Pete has been poring over the numbers and has the second quarter used values index report.
Well, last week, folks, we released our second quarter 2019 Machinery Pete used values index report. And this is my attempt, report I started a little over 8 years ago, to provide kind of a 30,000 foot view on what's happening, the latest trend line with used farm equipment values. Now, when you look at this chart, the simple starting point is on the left, the 1 to 10 rating scale. Over my 30 years tracking auction prices, I've sort of tabbed 6.0 here is what I consider stable or normal. Now, of course, there's very rarely any normal with used farm equipment values, but if you look at the current rating, 6.8, yes, down just a little bit from 6.9 in the first quarter, but that's very common in the second quarter. It's kind of a softer time of year to sell. Now, to me, the big story here, you have to go back to fourth quarter of 17. We're kind of in that mid-6 range, and then kind of a slow climb up into the high 6 range here recently. Now, you might say, well, why have used equipment values been going up? How's that possible? Times are tough. Well, I think when times are tough, the focus shifts towards finding and acquiring the very nicest condition used equipment. And so that's what I've been seeing. Good prices on the good stuff. Now, the average condition stuff, a little softer. But here's an example on the good condition side from a farm retirement auction in East Central Illinois, July 20th. This 2011 John Deere 9870 SDS combine, 1,785 engine hours, sold for $140,000 with no heads, highest auction price in almost 2 years.
Thanks, Greg. Well, portions of Europe have been in a heat wave recently, and that means a lot of extra watering for crops and lawns. But check out this garden. It absolutely thrives in the heat. The details next.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
Can plants survive without irrigation? Well, one gardener in England is showing some can and some can even thrive. These gravel paths meander through a garden overflowing with color and delicate blossoms swaying in the warm currents of summer breeze. Welcome to Beth Yato's gravel garden, where plants never get watered and are even thriving in the current heat wave in the country. They only get water when it rains.
This actually used to be a car park for many years. And Beth always used to say that even the native weeds would curl up and die in July. It was that dry. But she knew that if she just chose the right plants that could cope with these conditions, she could create something really, really beautiful. It's definitely more important in these days when you have these volatile sort of changes in the weather. 1 minute one year we have very cold winters, then we have mild winters. We might have a very wet spring, we might have a very dry spring. Last year we had a heat wave that lasted We had about 50 days with very hot temperatures and no rain whatsoever. So it's really important to think about how you use water in your garden.
We're told some of the plants have gone without watering since the garden was created in 1992. And just look at all those beautiful flowers. Amazing, and a beautiful way to start the week. Well, that's all the time we have on this Monday. For all of us at AgDay, I'm Tyne Morgan. Have a great day in Farm Country.